Anything that I can drill a hole in the bottom can become a planter.
The rhododendrons are great for wildlife. The bumblebees, the tiger swallowtails.
When we did move here, this was just a hay field.
When you're out deadheading, it gives you that inner peace. If it's a bad day, get out in the garden.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Great Gardening. I'm your host, Sharon Young, and as usual, we have our garden experts with us. They are horticulturist and educator Bob Olin and garden professional Deb Burns-Erickson. We want to hear from gardeners across the region who have questions for our experts. Volunteers from the St. Louis County Master Gardener Program are here to answer the phones when you call in. Call us locally or toll-free at 218-788-2847 or 877-307-8762, or email us at our new email, ask@pbsnorth.org. Let's talk about our current conditions today. We have video from Chester Bowl, and there's some green on the ground, and things are starting to grow.
Moving
no
on
snow.
very quickly. It's not white, it's turning green. And actually
exciting.
the landscapes are really beginning to green up now.
Buds are swelling.
Buds are swelling. Pussy willows are gorgeous out in the woods right now. Yeah, there we go. And of course the daffodils are up
Everywhere.
everywhere. They're just beautiful. First sign of spring. And they're one of the spring flowering bulbs that really naturalize. So if you want to put something in the ground that lasts a long while, the deer don't like them particularly. Daffodils or narcissus, so many varieties too, aren't there?
So
Deb?
many varieties,
Yep.
so many sizes, colors, everything.
Beautiful. Last summer, we visited Barb Isaacson of Moose Lake, Minnesota. She showed us her flower garden that is buzzing with native bees, as well as her hosta shade garden. Let's take a look.
Hi, I'm Barb Isaacson. We're in my yard. Gonna take a look at my gardens. We've been here since 1986, and when we came, there was a row of peonies along the neighbor's garage and one rose bush in the front yard. And we've added all of the other plants that are here and gardens. Well, when we started out in the backyard here, we built a little deck and put a screen house on it. And then I thought, well, it would be nice to have a few flowers around it. And so then I started wondering what kind of plants I could have in the shade where I was. So my friend said, well, hostas are kind of pretty. So I thought, well, okay, I'll go look for some shade plants. I found hostas and astilbes. Later on, we put this shed up because our screen house kind of got tired. So now we have a gardening shed. I found out there's gold hostas, there's variegated, there's all kinds of colors and sizes. In this part of the yard, we have a little more sun. So I did put in some daylilies, which are another favorite of mine. And they go nicely with this bee balm, which is appropriately full of bees right now. These are tiny native bees. I like bee balm around my yard because they do feed the bees very well. Well, now we're in our front yard where the sun is. So now we have all the things that love to be in sun. Boy, now talk about bees. This bee balm is literally crawling with bees. Wow. We had a slope here that was hard to mow and it was kind of a pain. So we decided we would make a terrace garden. We also found out later on it was really a benefit because all these flowers attract pollinators for our peas and our cucumbers and our green beans and tomatoes and everything in the garden. I think we get better production out of our plants, which is nice because our vegetable garden is very small. I would say if you have an inclination, plant a garden. It doesn't make any difference if it's perfect or if it's not perfect. All gardens are great.
Now it's time for some questions. Tony has emailed us a question with some photos. He's saying that he's been having some issue this year with his tomato seedlings. The pictures are of a stupus tomato, which we've been growing for about 20 years from saved trees. We started several different varieties of tomatoes, and the majority are from seed that we save year after year. This is the first year that we can remember ever having problems with starting tomatoes. Whatever has affected the stupus has spread to a few other varieties also, but not as bad as the stupus plants. The blisters eventually result in holes in the leaves. We first noticed the bottom 2 leaves on the stupus wilted and died. Then these blister-like formations appeared on the other leaves. We did spray the plant with neem oil the other day, but it does not appear to have had much effect yet. Have you ever seen this before, and do you have any suggestions about how to remedy this? Thank you, Kathy.
Well, we'll take a crack at it. First off, it doesn't look like insect or disease. So that means it's a growth disorder of one type or another, and there are a couple little clues there. The blistering, oftentimes we get a condition called edema, where that plant has just pulled so much water up, and then in a humid environment, it can't get rid of it through the stoma. So I really think that what I would do, and it's across species, stupus is one of the more vulnerable. It's one of the older heirloom plants, but there are others as well that are vulnerable to it. So I think I would just put a fan on there, try to drop the humidity so you suck more of that moisture out, and then back off on the watering. So at this point, that would be my advice. Just alter the growing conditions. Less water, lower the relative humidity.
Thank you. Mark in Ino, Wisconsin is stating, last winter he had voles and or mice eat all the bark off the whole circumference of his apple trees. Will they survive?
Apple trees. Apple trees are done for. Sorry.
Sorry to say, that
Sorry.
might be one of those prune at ground level situations. He will want to get another plant in the ground right now, I think, because maybe he'll get lucky and it'll just barely take the outer bark off, but usually they'll take it right into that inner bark, and then the tree will pop buds, so we think it's going to survive, but usually that's the demise of a tree.
Okay. We have a viewer that's asking, what are the best bushes or shrubs to plant on a steep hillside to prevent erosion?
Bushes. Oh, I mean, you could do forsythia.
Yeah.
You could, well, you can't do, I was thinking honeysuckle, but you can't do that anymore because that's
He would have
invasive.
He would have a lot of choices, but I really think that he's got erosion, and I think I'd get some grass in there. So get some fiber rolls out there or terrace it. You can buy these rolls that are filled with either straw and prevent, or straw mats. So with some seed impregnated in it. So I would try to stabilize the soil first. First, let's get some turf on there one way or another, prevent the erosion, and then come in with your forsythia, which would be a good idea
Fast
in
growing.
the upper story.
Great, thanks. Now, Bob, you wanted to talk a little bit about raised beds.
Yeah, let's take a little look at that. You know, when people say raised beds, and there are a lot of folks that have real difficult soils, it's very rocky or it's very heavy clay, so they want to raise it up. You don't need a structure necessarily, just raise the soil and just shovel the soil on the inside or drop some additional soil on top, and this improves the drainage. Or you obviously can go to a structure of one type or another. Now, improving drainage is a big reason. We want to get some of that water off. Another thing is the soils are going to warm earlier in the spring, so you get a jump on the season because they're up and down, we're draining the water off, we're going to get warmer temperatures faster. Obviously with a raised bed, particularly if you got a container, if you're off the ground maybe 2-3 feet, it makes it real easy to get there, don't have to do any stooping. And then another real advantage of a raised bed contained in a structure is you get to fill it with your soil of your choice. So you can modify the soils. You can start with a mineral soil. You can use some peat. Familiar with that, Doug? You can use some of the peat, and you can fill it in there. So you can have a combination of both organic and inorganic soils. Improves the drainage. You can have very good texture in that soil. Basically, it can be weed-free, and then you can pretty easily manage the fertility, the pH, as well as the organic matter. So it's something where you can control the soil, which is so absolutely critical for a raised bed. So many advantages in raised beds. We get these questions all the time because there's been a lot of controversy over what are we going to build them out of. We obviously like some of the natural wood, cedar being one of our local favorites, redwood as well. They're rot resistant. What you do not want to do is you do not want to just put a pine bed. I've seen several built just recently. No treatment, no control, just pine boards. They'll rot very quickly for you. So you really want to look at some of the treated ones as an option. We'll talk about those in a moment. And then we've got a lot of synthetic composite materials made from some of the recycled plastics. I think those are good options. These are typically decking materials. And then you can use a cement block. You got to be a little careful there because that's alkaline, so you want to manage your pH a little bit. And even the old water tanks, a galvanized steel, as long as we got drainage in the bottom. So people really have a lot of options. Now, you want to be, if you're going to use the treated wood products, use only the newly approved treated materials. We got a group of materials called alkaline copper quaternary. This is ACQ, approved by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency as well as the Wood Producers Association, approved for residential use. So I think if you're still concerned about the possibility of maybe a little copper, remember that's a trace nutrient anyway, but if you're concerned with edibles and that leaching in, let's line this with a real heavy poly film, or you can use like a swimming pool liner or something like that, then you don't have an issue at all. But definitely treated woods. Here's what you want to stay away from. Avoid all those older treated materials. We had chromium copper arsenates, abbreviated as CCAs. These were the old green timbers. Stay away from all that. Their use was discontinued in 2003. Stay away from all the creosote treated materials, even if they're aged. Then we used to be able to treat with a product called pentachlorophenol, abbreviated as Penta. Stay away from that as well. So we've got better products. Go to your home center and talk with them about treated materials, but make sure you got something. You're going to go to all the expense and all the trouble of creating a raised bed. So make sure you've got quality materials, treated materials that align with poly if you're concerned about that, or some of the composites so that it will really last a long while for you.
Thank you so much, Bob. Let's get back to some more questions. Terry in Race Lake has an infestation of night crawlers in the yard, causing it to be really bumpy. What do you know about that? Do you know how to remove them?
Well, obviously, they're not native, and that's been some of the controversy, of course. They come in and they will make a mess out of things. They do tend to aerate the soil, so they have some options that way. Drying things down or trying to force them out one way or another. There are different kinds of electric probes that have been used and other things, but they're really creating a problem. You also can just plug aerate if it's on the lawn. Plug aerate, open it up, drag in some organic material on top of it, and that oftentimes will take care of the situation.
Help dry it down.
After it's dried down and roll it out a little bit.
Great.
And reseed.
Roy in Two Harbors wants to know if mason bees are viable in the region. He's read that they're excellent pollinators.
Sure.
They're going to need a nice little house. I mean, you're going to have to help them out a bit. I mean,
You might.
You know.
They're in that big group of native bees.
Pollinators.
Yeah, and they're such great pollinators. So again, and we're going to have an opportunity in a future show to talk a little bit about this, but leave an area that's completely undisturbed. And there's just an area that's going to go wild so that they have a chance to nest and overwinter properly, both in the debris and down in the soil. And mason bees, certainly we've got them. They're among the natives that are in our natural environment.
Cal in Duluth has a lily of the valley patch being invaded by moss and dandelions. What can Cal do?
Moss and dandelion.
It's interesting.
That is really interesting, because the moss would be for the moisture, and then the dandelions for where it's full sun.
Right, and then he's got, that's a different kind of combination there, really.
It's being invaded. Well, he could move them. I mean, if they're really being invaded.
Right, if it's
But-
really invasive, but moss isn't particularly invasive, and he can carefully dig if he wants to take the dandelions out of there, and so he can eliminate them that way. But that is an unusual
that is.
combination. Usually we see moss where there's so much moisture that the dandelions don't do. But again, big taproot on the dandelions, so I guess that could occur.
Okay. There's a caller that wants to start a new garden in her yard that's currently lawn, but it's mostly heavy clay. How should she start preparing the soil? And dig down or make raised beds?
Oh, raised bed. But she'd have to do both. I mean,
Could
she's
do
going to, if she's doing it now, she's going to have to remove the turf and then amend and, take out the turf and then bring in something to raise the bed, something to, plant into, especially if it's, heavy, and amend it.
That's a great use for the raised beds because, as you say, real heavy clay. Clay is, for a lot of particularly perennial materials, is a pretty good substance because there's a lot of nutrient there. But raising it up for veggies and your annuals, I think, as you point out, add something to it, or building a structure there. But right now this time of year she's going to have to cut that turf and get that sod out of there. Otherwise it becomes kind of an abscission layer where the moisture comes down and just sits on top of that until it's completely decomposed. Cut the sod out, raise the bed, and she'll do just fine.
Great. This viewer is asking, how can I keep squirrels and chipmunks from burrowing under my bulbs and eating them? She's tried covering them up at the top, but the varmints got them anyway. Should she use blood meal or something to throw off the scent?
I wonder by covering, did she mean covering it with a wire cloth or, with hardware cloth, or what did she mean by covering it? That would be,
Yeah,
she could use the wire cloth.
Yeah, we
hardware
really like
cloth
hardware
would be
cloth.
easy to use, easy to apply, easy to stake down, and would give really good control. Just
right.
making sure it's all completely covered and in place and staked down.
It's true. Hardware cloth, now that's 1/4 inch. That's heavy galvanized so that it can't get through it. Chicken wire won't do the job oftentimes for you. At first it rusts pretty quickly and you can lose them that way. So before they sprout, that's a good control, but you got to get them off as they're coming out through the ground, of course.
Sure. There's a viewer that's in Superior and asking, when is the right time to start planting vegetables in the ground? Is it warm enough? Are night temperatures ready?
No.
Well,
I mean,
not at Zim.
Not for a lot of things.
Not for a lot of things. I actually pulled some soil temperatures. We're running at the 2-inch level where you want to take soil temperatures. We're running about 48 degrees, which isn't bad for germinating a lot of things. You get down about 4 or 5 inches and we're still 42, 43. I think salad greens right now, anything goes in the salad, lettuce, spinach, radishes. These are the crops, all your warm season crops, from the cucumbers, the vine crops, corn, beans, peas you could put in the ground right now, but every warm season crop, you really want to wait till warm temperatures are above 50 degrees at the 2-inch level.
Well, thank you for the insights, you two. So now let's check out your sent-in photos with the local dirt.
Let's see what's growing in your neighborhood with the local dirt. Mike Heim of Hayward, Wisconsin sent us 3 photos. And from Instagram, Brenda sent us plenty of photos. Take a look. Send us photos from your garden. Email us at greatgardening@pbsnorth.org, and it could show up on air or our Instagram feed.
Now we have 2 photo questions to answer. Question number 1. I have an old Harrelson apple tree that came with my house that's on its last legs. Is it worth saving or should I replace it?
Well, I look at a tree like that and I say it's still producing, it's still productive. You can see the main stem was topped there at one time or another, may have split. As long as it's producing, enjoy it.
Right.
But plant another tree right now because it takes several years for a new tree to come in. So plant another tree, and by the time the new one comes in, you may want to take that one out of there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, one would be, once it starts to get more productive than the other, then you want to take that. And just depends on how many other trees you have for, how many do.
And the space you have and so forth.
Yeah.
But when you have a variety like Harrelson that is very, very long-lived, and even though that was a little unusual way that was pruned up, if it's producing, keep it coming, but get another one ready to go because it's on its last legs.
Great idea. Question number 2. We have these trees sprouting up the last couple of years, and we think they are poplar trees. They're becoming very invasive, and I wonder how we can get rid of them. I've been able to pull out very small ones, but the big ones have large roots.
Mow.
Yeah, you're just going to you're going to lop those off, get a chainsaw, cut them off, and then you can't let anything sprout because they have this very aggressive underground root system. That's why, where we're harvesting for fiber, they'll just clear cut and they come back and regenerate from those underground stems and root systems. So going to have to continue to mow and never let any of that
Do
green
not let it go
tissue
to seed.
emerge.
And don't let it go to
Don't
seed.
let it go to
Try.
seed.
Right.
All right, now moving on, Deb, you wanted to cover an interesting topic tonight, right?
So the Minnesota tip, and we discuss this a lot right now because people are buying their mother roses for Mother's Day. And so there are beautiful floribundas, grandiflora, hybrid teas, beautiful roses, but they're not hardy. So the Minnesota tip, a simplified version, is you can dig a trench, and it should be like a foot deep at least, up to 18 inches, depending on how comfortable you are with putting this and the size of the rose. And then dig a trench, and then carefully dig up your the rose and get as much of the root material as you can to fit into that little trench, and then cover it completely with soil. And you can put over it also mulch or bagged leaves, and that will really help preserve it and keep that temperature consistent inside of it. And then, but then there's also, there's kind of a Minnesota, or well, it's kind of my hack, as far as if you have, we sell a lot of tree roses, and people always wonder, what do I do with it? And you can keep non-hardy ones in their pots. And what's nice about it, if you did do the Minnesota tip with a tree rose or an annual rose, really the Floribundas grandiflora tea roses, and you keep them in that pot and you dig the grave, it's easier to get it and put it right in. And then when the frost starts to push up the pot, then you know that it's ready and that the frost is pushing out, and then you can easily dig it out. I have a friend, and she had a rose tree that she forgot in a garden shed all winter, realized in February that it was not protected and that it had just been sitting out there, but her shed never got below 0. 0 is the critical factor for most of those roses. If you can keep it in a position where it's not going to get below 0, she had it and she brought it into her sun porch and she let it start greening up, and it's doing great right now. And so you can manipulate them also with temperatures and in a nice big container. And for tree roses, if they're in a container, make sure it's big enough so that you can water it. Once your rose starts tipping over 3 or 4 times, then it's time to bump up the pot and get it into something bigger that can hold more moisture, but yet that you can either keep for the winter or bury in with the Minnesota tip.
Really some good points. I like that 0 degrees. Now, people should be aware that for many of us, that garage, particularly if it isn't attached to a house, that can go down to 20 below. No wind factor, but it can be very cold. So you have to, people misjudge temperatures all the time. Throw a thermometer in your garage in the winter and get a little idea. If there's a
Or
little
your
heat,
car. Pay attention when you start up your car and what the temperature is on really cold nights. Then you know how cold it is there and what temperature you hold.
Right.
You can also insulate them with a little bit of pink board and things and insulate the containers, but that's a lot of work.
Well, thanks. Let's wrap things up with a few more questions. Cindy emailed us and is asking, how do you go about getting your soil tested for lawn improvement?
Oh, we love to soil test. I take a lot of soil tests, and your soils may be consistent, but mine are always all over the place. The easiest thing for me to say is Google either University of Minnesota Soil Testing Lab or University of Wisconsin Soil Testing Lab. It's going to give you all the instructions, how to send it in, what the charges are going to be. And I'd say just start with your basic tests. You're going to get phosphorus, potassium, organic matter, and pH, and those are the real critical items. If you were experiencing, after those are all good, there are some trace and nutrient deficiencies that could be accounted for with a more elaborate test. But start with the basics and just Google that. That's the easiest. They'll tell you how to take the samples, how to send the samples, how to pay for the samples. And you can also request an email response, which probably is a good idea right now, rather than waiting for the results in the mail, because you want the results so you can modify your soil prior to planting.
Great. Denny in Mattawa is asking, can you put too much 10-10-10 on a veggie garden and lime too?
Yes, yes. And too much of a good thing is still too much. And so people need to consider that when they're applying. They need to, with the soil test, they're going to tell you how much to apply, how much the pounds and square footage. And absolutely, either of those, any of those could be overdone. And same with when people are applying different pesticides, herbicides, and things. Read the labels, because do not keep reapplying, because you can get some phytotoxicity to the plants. You can kill the plants with too much of a good thing.
That's right. Of those two, it's the lime that concerns me, because you get away with some 10-10-10, the nitrogen is going to run away, phosphorus can stay there, and phosphorus adheres, and we can get really excessive levels. But lime, you can push your pH, it becomes very alkaline, that your plants can't really pick up the nutrients. So most of our soils don't need any lime at all, unless you're on a acidic peat. Then you might want some lime. But Lime is not this cure-all that people seem to think. If your soil test calls for lime, apply lime. If it doesn't, stay away from all lime as well as wood ash.
Okay, Jane in Duluth Heights is asking, what can you tell her about long day onions?
Ooh, long day onions from Texas. A lot of people get their bulbs from Texas because
Yes.
they're long day. They're grown under long day. But you get a better onion because we have long days that we're trying to grow under.
The varieties are different. You're absolutely right. And there is a lot of Texas plant production. But the long day varieties are those that bulb up when the days get real nice and long. So they're not going to grow out very well in Texas, even though they may start there as transplants. But you really want to be very conscious of that as their days get longer. It makes a great big difference. So sweet Spanish, I'm trying to think, candy. Candy's a midday onion, but it grows pretty well for us even on long day. And Red Zepp would be a red variety. Red River's another good long day variety. And the Walla Wallas are long days. So I think this far north, you really want to focus on those varieties that are labeled specifically as long day onions. But they might have come from Texas originally, where they grew out the seed,
where they're
or
growing
grew
out the bulbs, because people order from there a lot.
Right, because they grew them in the winter and they're ready to ship north, but still buy them by variety.
Well, that's all for Great Gardening tonight. You can follow us on our social media channels, on Instagram at Great Gardening PBS North, and on YouTube at youtube.com/greatgardening, where you can find tonight's episode posted tomorrow. Thank you so much, Deb and Bob. It was wonderful chatting with you tonight. From all of us here at Great Gardening, we'll see you next week, and please enjoy the garden.